we can,
wherever we can. We're talking hoops.
and you know our guys will ramble.
Can you just email me the rest of this story?
This is Just Dubs
with John Dickinson.
Dickinson's an underrated talent, 100%.
On KNBR 104.5 and 680.
Streaming live at KNBR.com.
And on the KNBR app.
Jarris Walker will track it down, and that will do it. So the Indiana Pacers stay hot. The Warriors coming with 10 healthy bodies and missing 6 of their top 8 in the rotation. They hung in the game, really all game.
Yeah, hung in the game, but another loss as the Warriors got beat 108-96. We welcome you in here to Just Dubs on a Saturday morning, beginning here at 10 o'clock on KNBR, the sports leader. It is John Dickinson with you. And with the new year and with the 49ers season now complete, we will expand this show to 2 hours here moving forward. And most weeks, if not every week here between now and when the Giants start in the regular season, it will be a 2-hour program. There may be a couple here or there where we need to switch over and make it a YouTube-only show. And we always appreciate everyone who watches this show, our Dubs OT devotees who switch over to Just Dubs here on Saturdays. So welcome in. We're going to be talking some Warriors and NBA here for the next couple of hours. Like to keep the show interactive. 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. That is the number to give me a call or shoot me a text here. Again, we appreciate everybody who's filing in on YouTube and Twitch as we find you here on this Saturday morning. Warriors back to 500, of course, because that seemingly is what this team is, despite how they get to it. And we've seen the Warriors get to it in different ways here the last couple of years. This year, extremes. 12-3 at the beginning, then 3-12 to get to 15-15, and now 4-4 in the last 8 with some injuries and some roster depletion. And look, I think everybody at this particular point knows what this Warriors team is as they sit 3 games away now from the midpoint of the season. You know, we're not just in quarters and thirds anymore. I mean, the season is halfway over for the Golden State Warriors. A week from tonight, it will be halfway over. They play in Toronto on Monday, Minneapolis on Wednesday, and then they come back home, which will begin a long stretch of home games and games in Northern California a week from tonight. But that'll be the midpoint of the season. The trade deadline is now inside a month away, and the Warriors have to decide what the heck they're going to do to try and improve this roster, because regardless of whether it's a night like last night where you look at the Warriors and they compete, but they don't have Steph Curry or Draymond Green or Andrew Wiggins or Jonathan Kuminga, Brandon Podziemski, Gary Payton II. I think it was 6 of the top 8 in the Warrior rotation, depending upon how you have your individual pecking order set as to the Warriors rotation if you start ranking everybody out. But regardless of a loss last night that was a schedule loss that the Warriors punted on at 10 o'clock in the morning Pacific time yesterday in the second of the back-to-back, and I thought Steve Kerr had some fascinating things to say in the pregame press conference. And I mean, really, it just blunt and to the point with some of the injuries and the fact that the Warriors are in a position right now, because we always have this debate about, hey, are the Warriors good enough to be punting games and resting everybody and giving guys that are banged up the night off? Like, we always have that debate. I personally hate it. It's one of my biggest pet peeves in sports, and in particular in the NBA, when teams give their star players the night off and certain guys aren't playing in back-to-backs. But the reality of the situation is, and we'll hear from Steve Kerr, if the Warriors don't do that right now and Steph ends up out with this knee thing or this thumb sprain that's popped up and he's been wearing the wrap on his hand, if the Warriors lose Steph Curry and or Draymond Green for 3-4 weeks, the season's over. Like, it's done. It's done before the trade deadline. And you look at the landscape of the Western Conference, a lot of mediocrity, a lot of mid. Everybody's 5-6 game winning streak away from feeling like they're right back in it, not only for the play-in tournament, but maybe for a top 4 to 6 seed in the West as you look at the way things have separated out. But you're also a 4-game losing streak away from kind of being out of it and buried and 12th with 6, 7, 8 teams ahead of you and not a lot of quality moves to be made when you're finding yourself in desperation mode. So we can get into that, and we will here for the next couple of hours, because I still think, and look, as you look at what's happened, and we like to look at the last week and the week ahead on this show. And when we were with you last week, we knew Steph Curry wasn't going to play in the first of the back-to-back against Memphis, but the Warriors had the game against Memphis coming up. They had a home game against Sacramento coming up. They had Miami, who's in shambles without Jimmy Butler, coming up. And then they were going to go to Detroit and Indiana to begin the 4-game road trip with the 2 games back-to-back Thursday and Friday. And I think at that point you're thinking, hey, the games obviously without Steph are going to be tough and prove to be 2 of the 5 that the Warriors have played here in this last week since we were last in this space here on KNBR. But to be thoroughly embarrassed by the Kings, and again, the Kings are playing a lot better basketball. They've won 6 in a row. They won last night in Boston, by the way. Doug Christie, he's got him, whether it's him or the fired coach bump or whatever it is, they're playing quality basketball. And they smoked the Warriors. That's the point of the conversation. And then you get Miami in the second of a back-to-back, and they come in and control the game against the Warriors. And the Warriors, Steph Curry said it. No-shows. 2 no-shows. After you win a game without Steph. 2 no-shows. They go to Detroit, and again, they build the 18-point lead with 5.5 minutes to go in Detroit. And again, all of this is just to set up how fragile things are right now for the Warriors. They are really, really fragile. And they get the weekend off, and they go up to Toronto, and we'll see what happens. That becomes almost a must-win game for this team moving forward. But all of this is also to say they got to freaking do something. Because the one thing that I think has been the biggest tell here, whether it's winning a game without Steph, whether it's losing 2 games where Steph plays well and kind of getting blown out. You did get blown out by the Kings. The game felt like a blowout by the end. Non-competitive no-show against Miami. So you lose 2 games where Steph plays well, nobody else does. Then you win a game where Steph doesn't play well, and you get contributions in Detroit from Guy Santos and a bunch of others who hadn't performed. Buddy Hield had his best game in weeks. So you win that game, but you almost lose it. And the fashion in which the Warriors would have lost that game, had they lost it, I think would have been, catastrophic to fall under 500, which is the one thing the Warriors still have yet to do this season is dip below 500. But it's got to be much better than just not dipping below 500 if this team's going to make any semblance of a run toward true respectability. And that's the other thing I want to get into here between now and 12. This isn't about championship or bust. And I know that's the framework for the way everything is spoken about with the Warriors. But it's not just championship or bust. It's be competitively relevant or bust. Do something that helps you get out of the play-in glut and show some improvement off of where you were last year or where you were 2 years ago when you were in the final couple of weeks of the season able to eke into a 6 seed in a mediocre Western Conference and win a playoff series. That roster, though, that the Warriors currently are putting out there, it's not enough. And that's the one thing. We can talk about who played well and didn't and all these individual games, and Steph's got to miss this one, and where's Andrew Wiggins in that one, and Buddy Hield stinks when he doesn't make shots, and should the young guys be playing more? Like, all of those things are on the table for discussion, but the reality is none of those things matter for this Warriors team unless they make a move, unless they make multiple moves. So that sets the table here for the next couple of hours on Just Dubs with JD. 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. The number to call in. The Golden State Lumber and Building Materials text line is open. Appreciate everybody filing in here on YouTube and Twitch. We will dig into the comments there, seeing many of our regulars already popping up here. But what's the move? What's the move that helps the Warriors get to what I would deem to be respectfully competitive? Respectfully competitive is how I will phrase it. Maybe not title contender. Hell, maybe not even top 4 in the West. But can you get into that 5-6 range and get yourself to where you can compete in a playoff series and feel like you have a shot to win? This team, to me, right now, has no shot of getting out of the play-in tournament, and they may, via injury or just poor play, wind up completely missing the playoffs altogether, the play-in altogether. It's that fragile as you look at the standings, and we'll do that here over the course of the next couple of hours. So 808 KNBR, let's go ahead and take a quick timeout. It's John Dickinson. It's Just Dubs right here on KNBR 104.5 and 680, the sports leader.
Gui Santos 3. Why not? Gui Santos is 3 for 3 on threes and has been Mr. Everything tonight. Duran went to dunk it. Trace said no. Ricocheted to Tobias Harris, and he ran over Gui Santos.
This is KNBR, and this is Just Dubs with John Dickinson. Streaming live on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
All right, welcome back. Just Dubs here on a Saturday. How about Gui Santos? Out of nowhere, helps them win a game against Detroit on Thursday. And the Warriors split the last two because that's what Golden State does. They are a 500 team. They're 19-19. They've got the weekend off. They play Toronto Monday, then Minnesota on Wednesday, and then a whole hell of a lot of home games coming up for the Dubs at the end of January with a quick trip over to Sacramento to take on the suddenly hot Sacramento Kings, who have equaled the Warriors' record now with the 6 consecutive wins at 19-19. You look at the standings in the Western Conference as I bring it up, and the Warriors and Kings both tied at 19-19, 9th and 10th in the Western Conference, right as they were at the end of last season, 9th and 10th in the Western Conference. San Antonio, a half game back of both of them. Phoenix, a game back of both of them, 11th and 12th. Those are the first two teams out. Only 3 teams at this point out in the Western Conference of the play-in tournament, and it's Portland, Utah, and New Orleans. And then you look at things above. The Warriors currently 2 games out of the 6 seed, 3 games out of the 5 seed, and only 3.5 games out of even the 4 seed, although I do think there's a separation there if you look at the teams that are getting it done. And OKC's on fire. I mean, they are crushing it right now. 9 of the last 10, and they had obviously the long winning streak before they got beat the other night by Cleveland. But no, you look at Oklahoma City, 31-6, and then you've got the Rockets and Grizzlies, who are, I think, 2 surprise teams playing at the level that they are, more than 10 games over 500. And Denver and Dallas are 2 teams that I think project to be better. Dallas has been living with a lot of injuries, so they're 22-16 right now. Denver at 22-15. So those are the 4 and the 5, and I think if those teams get themselves right, those teams are probably in that top 5 in the Western Conference. Lakers right now have been up and down, and they are 20-16. Minnesota, I think, is a team that thinks they feel like they should have the ability to make a push. So I think there are some quality teams that can set their sights on being a top 6. And I just don't see the Warriors in that conversation. The Warriors have beaten a bunch of these teams, right? They've beaten OKC and Houston and Memphis, and haven't beaten Denver, but they've beaten Dallas. I mean, you look at they've beaten Minnesota. So you look at, can the Warriors compete with these teams on individual game basis? Sure. But this team, as it's currently constituted, is in big trouble, I think, as it relates to getting into the playoffs and making the kind of run to get themselves in that conversation of being, let's say, between a 4 and a 6 seed, which I think is exactly what they thought they were going to be able to do here at the beginning of this season, especially after they got off to the 12-3 start. That's the most frustrating thing, I think, for the Warriors, is the fact that they completely wasted that 12-3 start, and now they're just at a point where they're basically what they've been the last couple of years, and having to figure out exactly what they look to do to be able to improve the roster as the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes heats up down in Miami, and the back and forth with all of that, with him being suspended and wanting out, and the Heat trying to work through a trade and not trying to appear as desperate to just get rid of him for anything, content on, at least for now, waiting until closer to the trade deadline to try and attempt to get some semblance of maximum value for Jimmy Butler. The Warriors reportedly out on Jimmy Butler, cool on Cam Johnson. and in love with Nikola Vucevic of Chicago. Go figure. But the Bulls at this point, dangling Vucevic, but also not exactly realistic, at least as things sit on January 11th, as far as what they would take in a trade to get him. And it sounds like the Warriors, again, much like what they did with the Dennis Schroeder trade, trying to make the no-brainer small incremental move. And I said it a couple of days ago, and I'll say it again. Without Jonathan Kuminga, because the Warriors have been so dependent on Kuminga, they almost have to go look to do something immediately. And even if it is Vucevic, immediately to provide some kind of scoring punch. I mean, the guy's averaging 20 a game. And again, it's kind of a hollow 20 a game. Can shoot the three, can score a little bit on the inside. He's a bad defender. But when you look at what it costs the Warriors to get Schroeder, like right now, it just seems like the Warriors are not in and on the market for going and looking to give up future first-round draft capital and or young players to be able to make more of a significant move of consequence, whether it's Jimmy Butler, who reportedly they are out on, or Cam Johnson, who they are interested in, but behind other teams in the Western Conference specifically in terms of interest level and potential willingness to do a deal. And look, Cam Johnson's costing you a first-round pick. Cam Johnson, I think right now, would probably cost you 2 first-round picks. Kuminga and a pick or 2 picks if you were going to try to get him without having to give up Jonathan Kuminga, although the Nets have been a team that's been interested in Kuminga, even going back to last offseason, and maybe one of the teams that looks to throw an offer sheet in restricted free agency at Jonathan Kuminga. But I think when you look at the timing of the injury, and that's another thing as we look at things that have happened here in the last week, the timing of the Kuminga injury in the game against Memphis could not have been worse, because he likely is not going to play again until very close to the trade deadline or after the trade deadline. And so the Warriors are going to have to figure out ways to win games with the player that they had become far more dependent on of late in terms of his scoring. So it seems like the middling moves, again, the Schroeder move cost them nothing. DeAnthony Melton out for the season, some second-round pick swaps, and again, with a net of 2 second-round picks going back the other direction for Brooklyn. It feels like that kind of move, and Melton at this point, no disrespect to him, because he was a hell of a player, unfortunately injured, but giving up Melton for Schroeder was essentially giving up nothing. And it sounds like that's the kind of move that the Warriors are really looking at, but they're looking at more for a big, and Vucevic is the guy from Chicago that they've targeted. Does that move the needle? Again, I think it helps. I think, as I've said a lot, the Warriors have to do something. And we'd be talking about, again, second-round picks, I think, and salary filler to get to the $20 million that Vucevic is making. So you wouldn't have to necessarily give up a lot, but right now it's a scenario where the Warriors find themselves, and Vucevic has got another year in his deal too, $20 million this year. The Warriors have to send out as much in salary as they get back. So, if it's GP2 and Looney, it might have to be like GP2, Looney, and Lindy Waters. And that would add up to the $20 million, and you throw a couple of picks in there. But again, right now, Chicago's like, we want a first-round pick right now. And again, I think the Warriors are right in not giving up a first-round pick for Vucevic, but you can't just continue to look for the perfect deal without risking giving up something, or you're going to wind up post-trade deadline, post-All-Star break with not a lot of options at all. I mean, you're 4-game losing streak away, or a 3-7 10-game stretch away from basically being buried in 12th and kind of done, unless you can get really hot. So, to me, and Vucevic, 34, but averaging the 20 a game, and again, doing it inside, doing it outside, and somebody that could come in and I think be a complementary type role player and starter. Again, I feel like he's of the Schroeder ilk, and it would give you some lineup flexibility to add some shooting. All right, 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. Let's get JT in Oakland here on the Sports Leader.
Hey, dude, how you doing? Good points. I'll tell you, the one guy you don't trade is Wiggins. Can't trade Wiggins. I think Andrew Wiggins is a better all-around player than Jimmy Butler. I mean, that's just my opinion. He's reliable. And if you get rid of him, boy, our defense is going to go down the toilet. Because, I mean, besides Draymond, who else can we put, on the top scorer? I think this trading of Wiggins, I think, is ridiculous. I think you keep him. Jimmy Butler's a cancer in the clubhouse, I almost said, in the locker room. Yeah. And there's only one guy in the league. I mean, the Warriors have so many things to fix. One guy's not going to fix it unless it's one guy, and it's not going to happen. And that's LeBron James. He's the only one that can turn this around who would fit. Everyone else, they need two, three pieces.
They do.
Think on defense.
Well, I mean, it depends on the night. I mean, yeah, if you give up Wiggins, you wouldn't be good defensively. There's so many levels to this. I mean, I'm reluctant to give up Wiggins as well. If you give up Wiggins, you probably have to give up Wiggins and Kuminga, and that's the part that I would not necessarily want to do for Jimmy Butler. I would give up Kuminga for Jimmy Butler, but because I think Jimmy Butler and Wiggins would be great, but you can't make the deal without giving up Wiggins. And again, they're reluctant to give up Kuminga, period, because they still view him as a potential future star. And not only that, but somebody that is really important to this team. Like, they need to get him back because he had become, at least for a stretch here the last couple of weeks before his injury, the number 2 scorer next to Steph. So, yeah, I again, in a perfect world, you don't want to give up both, because Jimmy Butler would be your top defender at that point. But again, how engaged is Jimmy Butler going to be? And if you don't give him the contract. So I understand all of the concerns that the Warriors front office has as to not wanting to go get Jimmy Butler. But standing pat at the same time, and they have to weigh this, is, to me, you're only getting worse if you're the Warriors and you stand pat. And, yeah, they need multiple moves, and thanks, JT, appreciate the call. They need multiple moves, without a doubt. And, if it's Vucevic, it can't just be Vucevic. You can't have the Vucevic deal prevent you from making another deal, and I don't think the Vucevic deal would prevent you necessarily from making another deal. But, yeah, I don't Wiggins is not better than Jimmy Butler. I mean, that on the surface is just wrong. But again, what Jimmy Butler are we talking about the Warriors or some other team getting? I know there was a report. I saw this, and I should grab the audio from it and send it to Raph. I did see an interesting. It was Jake Fisher, formerly of Yahoo, and now he's with Bleacher Report. He writes with Mark Stein, and Mark Stein, the great longtime NBA writer and reporter, who had been with ESPN for decades, now does his own Substack, and Fisher writes on that Substack. They do a pretty strong weekly newsletter deal. And so when he had put out a video where he was talking about the trade deadline upcoming and different things that the teams are doing. And one thing he said was the Warriors are basically out on Jimmy Butler now, but don't be surprised if right before the deadline, if there's a little bit of desperation and there's no movement, and desperation both ways, desperation for Miami to move him and desperation for the Warriors to maybe make a move and risk the entire Jimmy Butler experience. What's it going to be to try and salvage the remainder of this season? And again, salvage does not mean you have to go win a title or end up in the conference finals or the NBA finals. Because that's the other part of this conversation. Because I hear this a lot. And it's the notion that the Warriors, hey, if you can't make a move that's going to make you a title contender, then just don't make a move. Not making a move, if you're the Warriors, is like making a negative move. They have to make a move. They have to make multiple moves. I think they have to do that. They have to make one move just to stay in the play-in tournament race, in my mind, given what we've seen and given the injuries and the fact that Steph Curry and Draymond Green cannot be counted on to play in back-to-backs. Like, you can't just be taking a 1-and-1 in every back-to-back. You can't just be punting on games against opponents that have similar records than you do. Can't do it. Can't have it. If you're doing that, you're asking for trouble. And again, Steve Kerr would say the Warriors don't have a choice in this particular situation. I hear it. But I think they need to make the Vucevic move. And that's not even my favorite move. But I think they need to make the Vucevic move to just stay in the play-in tournament race. To stay in the can you get to 7, 8, 9. You're basically tied for 9 now. But you have other teams in this mix, again, that are going to be doing things. The Kings are already playing better. 6 in a row. And that's a team when you look at, their differential. They had the 6th differential in the league. They just weren't winning close games. And things had gotten weird there internally. But you look at, they're on the upward tick is the point. Clippers have been up and down. Minnesota has been up and down, 20-17. But Minnesota, I think, Minnesota's probably got an 8 to 10 game winning streak in them. And then they're going to wind up right there in the top 4, 3, 4, 5. Like their time is coming, I feel like. Clippers, I think, are mid to high-end play-in. Lakers, I think, are mid to high-end play-in. They're 6, 7. Phoenix is going to do something. They're hanging on by a thread like the Warriors are, and San Antonio's been much better than expected, and they're in the play-in tournament race. So you've got all these different teams that have the potential to look to make all these moves. And again, if you're the Warriors, I think you have to look to do something. But I understand, to go back to JT's call and the Jimmy Butler component of this, I would not want to give up Wiggins and Kuminga in a deal for Jimmy Butler. And I understand all the reasons why the Warriors contract, PTO Jimmy, have the potential to really hurt a franchise on the way out. I mean, look at every place he's left. Look at every single place that he's left. It's wound up being a mess out the door. So, would you want that to risk that here? Again, I wouldn't give up. I would give up Kuminga. A lot of people wouldn't, but you can't do the deal without throwing Wiggins in it. I wouldn't want to give up Wiggins necessarily, although if it did reach that Jake Fisher point where it's desperation almost on both ends, and you could get him without giving up Kuminga, I think I'd probably look to do it at that point. If there was a way where you could swing it where you could get Jimmy Butler at the deadline for Wiggins and a pick, and then maybe you could flip Kuminga and a pick and get Cam Johnson, maybe Schroeder has to be in that deal. Which, by the way, the Schroeder deal is not working. That's another issue for the Warriors. Dennis Schroeder trade's not worked out here these last 3 weeks that he's been with the team. I think we're up to, 13 games that Schroeder's played? And he's played well in 3 or 4. Played poorly in 9 or 10. I would not have had Dennis Schroeder on the retrade block. And because of the CBA and the dates in which he was traded and all of that, I think he can't be traded until the day before the trade deadline or the day of the trade deadline, so he isn't going to be going anywhere quickly. But it's pretty fascinating to me that I would not have put him in the retrade category, and now I would put him in the retrade category because it just has not been a fit here in these first 10, 12, 13 games. And he's not shooting. And again, so much of it is his ability to operate and make shots. And he was making shots with Brooklyn. We've seen him make shots against the Warriors, just be very comfortable, spot up threes, get into the bucket for layups, little pull-up mid-range. Like, none of it has looked comfortable for Schroeder. And when he has been able to get open looks, he just hasn't hit them. So the Warriors preaching time, the Warriors preaching he'll figure it out. He's a smart player. I don't disagree with any of that. But as you look at this thing, at some point it's got to start to look fluid here between the Warriors and Dennis Schroeder. And I think that's where making other moves have the potential to, especially if they are moves for shooting, have the potential to further balance out the depth on this Warriors roster. Because that's the other part of going and getting Vucevic is you immediately start him. Although part of the discussion as to whether you go get him is would he be a finishing player? Because the Warriors love to have Draymond play the 5 to finish games. And his defense, talking about Vucevic, is so poor at times that maybe Steve Kerr wouldn't want to have him out there to finish games. But again, regardless of any of that, forget about any of that for a second. You could start Vucevic with Draymond and Wiggins for now, Schroeder and Steph, and you just have a little more, Draymond can protect him defensively. Vucevic works better with Schroeder if you're going to run pick and roll, pick and pop. It all opens things up for Curry. I think it would allow Wiggins a little more space to operate with Vucevic out there. And I think Kuminga, when he comes back and gets healthy, is in a better position to succeed with Vucevic. And you could start to look at the Wiggins, Kuminga, Draymond, Vucevic lineups with Steph Curry, which is another element to where then maybe Schroeder becomes somebody that's not a closing player every night. So again, Vucevic is not some game changer, season changer. All of a sudden you go from being the 10 or the 9 to the 4 or the 3 seed. But I do think that doesn't mean you don't make the move. I do think he helps stabilize it. He just gives the Warriors more options. Just gives the Warriors more options, more balance. I think it extends their depth. And you'd be losing some depth potentially, but the guys that you're going to lose, I think, and I know the Warriors don't want to just give up GP2 and Looney necessarily, but the guys that you would lose would have a difficult time getting on the court with those that would be being added. So I think you got to take a look at that as well. All right, 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. The Golden State Lumber and Building Materials text line is open. We'll get to a couple of text messages here. We will get to more phone calls. We do have a couple of lines open if you want to jump in and join the conversation. What do the Warriors do? There's only a couple of options with this team sitting at 500 and the trade deadline now less than a month away, less than 4 weeks away. We will continue the discussion there. It's Just Dubs with JD here on the Sports Leader.
live from downtown.
Hurry, way downtown. Bang! Bang!
This is Just Dubs with John Dickinson on the Sports Leader. Streaming live at KNBR.com and on the KNBR app.
All right, welcome back. 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. What do the Warriors do? They're 19-19. They lose 108-96 last night in Indiana. They punted on the game. No Steph, no Draymond, no Wiggins. Kuminga's been out. And again, legitimate injuries for all. And Steph trying to get back to a point where he can play in back-to-backs. I think that's going to happen if the Warriors are going to be able to get on some kind of a run. The other thing that's going to happen if the Warriors are going to get on some kind of a run is they're going to have to make a trade. Like they are going, and I think they're going to have to make multiple trades, as we've been discussing here through the first hour of the show. Appreciate everybody, as always, watching on YouTube and Twitch, and many of our regulars from Dubs OT in the mix here. JD, as we start here at the top, I want to say what's up to CA. We got Estimated Eyes in here as well. Estimated Eyes, when is JK back? Yeah, JK's reevaluated 2 weeks from tomorrow, so I would say he is, and he had, I think, gotten out of the walking or into a walking boot, off the crutches. Like, he's still got a ways to go. He's going to be reevaluated the final Sunday, so on the 26th. 2 weeks from tomorrow is when he gets reevaluated, and then that's when they start to set the initial timeline. But again, typically when a player is reevaluated, the first thing that will happen is they get to resume basketball activities, and I would say there's anywhere between a few days to a week, maybe more, of practice. And from that point, and often what happens is, depending upon the reevaluation and what the doctors say, it might be, hey, he's making really good progress. He's going to get reevaluated again in a week. And then maybe in a week he can start basketball activities, which are a few days to a week toward being able to play. So I think Kuminga he's at least 3 weeks away. That would be my estimation, but we know for sure he's at least 2 weeks away. So no Kuminga for Toronto and Minnesota and Washington and Boston and the Kings and the Bulls and the Lakers for sure. I mean, that's the next 7 games. I'd be surprised if he played the next 9 or 10 games, to be perfectly honest, as you look at the way things shake out on the schedule. CA, our buddy CA, JD, thoughts on Lonzo? I don't think Lonzo's a fit. Unfortunately. I'm looking at his numbers. I mean, yeah, he's 34 from 3. He's played 19 games, 34% from 3. I mean, I don't think he is. He's a buy low guy, but again, he's a point guard, and right now you have Steph Curry and you have Dennis Schroeder. So I got no interest, and he doesn't shoot, and the injury history now. So yeah, I don't have much interest in Lonzo Ball. 808 KNBR 415-808-5627. Little back and forth in the chat as to what the Warriors were trying to do last offseason and what they need to do as far as this offseason. A lot of guys out on Butler. Good to see Joe H. in the chat here. Good to see Uncle Looney back in the chat here. Uncle Looney says he's got the answer. Trade for Zion and tank. Zion Williamson made the show Tuesday. I was on with Copes and Derek Papa, and he was a name that I brought up. I mean, in the long list of names, I would be in on Zion if I'm the Warriors. He's only 24. He's not going to be 20. He'll be 25 next year. But to me, he is so young and could be such a buy low prospect at this point with a contract that you could control for the next handful of years. I mean, when Zion Williamson is healthy, which is rare, and he's keeping his weight in check, which is rare, but when he's healthy and available and on the court, he's a really good player. He is and would be by far the second best player on the Warriors roster and the best player as part of any future timeline. Like if you want, for all the two timeline and Kuminga this and Moody that, and we don't even know Kuminga's a headliner on another timeline. Zion Williamson healthy would be. Now, do you have to give up Kuminga to get him? I think the Warriors would probably be reluctant to do that, considering all the red flags surrounding Zion in terms of health, in terms of inability to keep his weight in check, and just basically being unserious, missing flights, showing up late for practices. Like, that's a bunch of stuff that just cannot stand. But if you're buying low and you're bringing him into your environment and you're betting that Rick Celebrini can get him healthy, I would look at Zion Williamson, and I said that the other day. I mean, to me, that is the kind of name and kind of player that you make a trade for him, and all of a sudden, if you can get him healthy a year from now or 2 years from now, you're thinking, oh, my God, the Warriors got an absolute steal. It's Steph and Zion here for a couple of years, and then it's Zion, and you're building around him. But the health is as big a concern as the weight, which is as big a concern as the attitude stuff. So it's really threefold. And yes, I know the health is related to the weight and vice versa, and the weight is related to the not taking things seriously. Obviously, as a professional athlete, you need to be able to get a handle on what your playing weight needs to be and how to be in the proper physical condition to perform. So it's all connected. And, yeah, it sounds like there's a maturity issue with Zion as well in terms of just not being locked in. Not being somebody that I mean, you can't be the guy that doesn't come to practice on time and all of that, but missing flights, getting suspended for missing flights, that stuff's all bad. But, and it would, as Uncle Looney says in the chat, it would potentially mean the Warriors would have to do a soft tank for this year, which I don't think they want to do. Because you'd want him to come in and basically have Rick Celebrini work with him, shut him down, get him right, basically send him to Warrior boot camp from whenever you would acquire him until training camp next year. Get him healthy. Don't put a lot of pressure on him to perform immediately. Constant check-ins as far as his weight and everything and his engagement level. And if all those things go right, then you may end up with a steal. So, yeah, that's an interesting name. But then, as I mentioned it, as an interesting name, and he has been a name that I've heard that the Warriors would at least consider. And then there was, I think, immediate reporting to the contrary from Mark Spears of Anscape and here on KNBR, one of our NBA and Warriors contributors. And the reporting, in addition to that the Pelicans are not looking to move him. So all of that factoring in, I would look at Zion Williamson. All right, you're listening to KNBR 104.5 FM and 680 AM, San Francisco, the sports leader, a Cumulus media station. It is Just Dubs here on a Saturday morning. We move on to hour number 2 of the program, 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. I don't hate looking for a potential Zion move. I really, really don't. I think that's one that, if it were available and on the table, depending upon how things go here in the next month, I would be willing to look at. So what's your move? That's the conversation today. It's going to be the conversation next week. It's going to be the conversation 2 weeks from now. It's going to be the conversation 3 weeks from now. Really, you cannot have a Golden State Warriors conversation right now without discussing what move they should make, because I think everybody would agree that they have to make a move, that they have to look to improve this thing, that it's just not solid enough from Stephen Curry's inconsistencies due to being banged up and the inability to play in back-to-backs. They can't win games when he plays well. They can win games when he doesn't play or doesn't play well. Odd. But he still got it in terms of being that number one in franchise caliber player when he's healthy. It's just not nearly as regular as it's been in the past. But I'm still of the belief, and I for all the names, and we've talked about Vucevic today, we've talked about Jimmy Butler today, we've talked about Zion today, we've talked about Lonzo Ball today, briefly. The guy that still, to me, makes the most sense is Cam Johnson. Cam Johnson makes the most sense. Not a superstar, high-end role player starter, shooting it well above 40% from 3 on 7 attempts. He's basically 3-4 for 7 every night. Basically 3 for 7 every night on average from 3. And I understand the willingness, or the unwillingness rather, to want to give up Kuminga in a deal for Cam Johnson. And it sounds as if Brooklyn, they want at least a first-round pick, if not a couple of first-round picks, to move Cam Johnson. But as much as I don't think Vucevic moves the needle in a significant way, and as much as I do think they still should go get Vucevic, Cam Johnson on the surface seems like the kind of player that might not move the needle as much as I actually think he would move the needle. So, and to me, it's twofold. And I get, hey, if you're the Warriors, you want to hold out. You don't want to overpay for Cam Johnson. Again, we always have this debate. They don't want to overpay for this. They don't want to give up that. They want to only make the perfect trade. They only want it's the thing that every team does when it comes to trades. Every team typically wants to trade guys they don't like or can't use for the perfect player. And that's why trades often don't get done. Because on both ends, it has to be too perfect. Nobody wants to feel like they're losing the deal. But, man, Cam Johnson, he steps right in, and you could start him. Does he fit? There's so many lineups. I love Cam Johnson and Wiggins together on the front line with Draymond. I love the ability, if Kuminga doesn't go in the deal, to put, then you could play Kuminga and Cam Johnson together with Draymond and Wiggins. You could play Wiggins at the 2 with Cam Johnson at the 3, Draymond at the 4, and a center at the 5. Like, you could play TJD with Draymond because they like that grouping right now, and then play Wiggins and Cam. Play Cam at the 3, play Wiggins at the 4, or at the 2, move Schroeder to the bench. And I think just the ability to spread the floor and be able to shoot, I think it opens up everything for everybody else. And again, I'd be willing to give up Kuminga and a 1 and the necessary salary filler, which is similar to the Vucevic salary filler to get Cam Johnson. I think he would open up that much. While not being a clear-cut number 2, we don't know that Kuminga's a clear-cut number 2 either, let alone a number 1, as he often gets projected to be in the future. But if he's that, it's that in 2027, 2028. That's just the reality. You know, it's not that in 2025 or 2026. But I don't know. That's Cam Johnson is the one player to where on the surface, the name, you think, oh, he's a nice player, but not necessarily going to be a needle mover, and he's been injured of late as well. He hasn't played since January 2nd, although he's set to come back, I think, maybe as early as tomorrow. Didn't play on Friday. But, yeah, I mean, you look at his most recent games, I mean, it's 26 on 6 of 12 from threes, 3 for 5 from threes, 2 for 5, 4 for 6, 3 for 7, 4 for 10. I mean, yeah, there's a 2 for 9 mixed in there, but, I mean, he is basically 3 for 7 every night. 44% from 3 in December, 44% from 3 in November. I mean, he brings it. He can score, and he does it efficiently. And he's a ball mover. You know, there are games where he's got 3 to 5 assists. It doesn't rebound a ton, but I'm telling you, having him as a threat to shoot and score opens things up. It takes the heat off of Steph Curry. It allows Andrew Wiggins to be much more of a slasher. It gives the Warriors the ability to play Trace Jackson-Davis if they want to, and Draymond together, and not have it be so constricted against certain teams. You could move Schroeder to the bench. Hell, if you don't have to give up Kuminga, you could have Kuminga and Schroeder coming off the bench. You could have finishing lineups with Wiggins, Kuminga, Cam Johnson, and Draymond if you wanted to. Like, that's the move. And, oh, by the way, he's 28. Going to be 29 in March. Like, that is the move. The non-flashy name, to me, with the highest impact. Willing passer, strokes it from 3, can score. Like, when you talk, again, maybe not a clear-cut number 2, but to me, when you talk about guys who could, that is the one sneaky impact player at a greater level than maybe his name would dictate on the surface. That's the guy I think the Warriors can, if they could get, they'd get on a run. And I mean, independent of whether Kuminga would have to be in that deal or not. And again, it's pricey. It's probably Kuminga and a 1 or 2 1s. And maybe Brooklyn doesn't even do the deal if Kuminga's not going to be in the deal. But that's the one player in terms of skill set, in terms of mentality, in terms of age, in terms of contract, in terms of fit with the other players on the roster. Again, whether Kuminga's a part of it or not, you'd be replacing Kuminga's points, and you'd be doing it in an efficient way that fits the system and I think would allow others to flourish. To me, that's the one that should be the no-brainer, that it confounds me that it's not a no-brainer to go get him. 808 KNBR. 415-808-5627. Let's go ahead and take a quick timeout. We'll come back. More from the YouTube chat. Some text messages to get to in the Golden State Lumber and Building Materials text line as well. As it is, Just Dubs here on KNBR 104.5 and 680, the Sports Leader.
Dub Nation, this is the real and inside story on Warriors basketball. Just Dubs with John Dickinson now continues, streaming live at twitch.tv/thesportsleader.
All right, welcome back. Just Dubs here on a Saturday, 808 KNBR. More from the YouTube chat, 415-808-5627. In just a moment, let's get to the Golden State Lumber and Building Materials text line as well as I click around here on these different screens that I've got in front of me. A lot of screens. 669, I'd rather them wait and try to get Lauri Markkanen. He literally fits every role they are missing. Yeah, I mean, he is stretch big, fits with Draymond, fits with whoever. But, yeah, you look at what is going on as far as Markkanen. And again, that's the thing where everybody's going to have to kind of debate exactly what they think is the right move here. And the right move might be as frustrating as it is. I don't think the right move is wait. I don't think the right move is do nothing, kick the can down the road, and end up trying to make a deal in the offseason. I think at a minimum you go get Vucevic or somebody like that and look to try to help things in a minimal fashion now, and then if you kick the can down the road, you kick the can down the road, but you still fortify yourself a little bit, at least toward trying to maybe get out of that play and glut. Again, I don't think Vucevic is a big-time needle mover. Is he the difference between maybe being a 41-win team and a 44-win team? Maybe. I think that's what you'd have to really examine. Estimated eyes, JD, we're not contending this season. Yeah, they're not contending for a title this season, but I don't think anybody thought they were contending for a title this season. Like, did anybody think the Warriors were contending for a title this year? Like, even when they were 12-3. I know there were starting to be the weird comparisons about 3 years ago when they started 18-2 and then ended up getting all the way to the finals and winning the NBA championship. But again, and maybe it's semantics, but I'm not of the mold that this team has to contend for a championship, or you believe they're going to contend for a championship. Otherwise, that means you just don't do anything. Like, that's dumb. Like, what do you got to have some kind of a goal as to what you're doing. The weekly debate on Kuminga in the YouTube chat, and nightly on Dubs OT as well. Uncle Looney saying Zion's the only chance at a star. He could be a number one. Kuminga will never be a number one in Uncle Looney's position. Opinion. And look, Kuminga might end up being a one, but I don't think he's going to be a one on a very good team. I think he's definitely not going to be a one on a championship contending team. I mean, and again, I don't mean to. Sometimes when I say these things, it comes off as I'm being rude when I'm being real. I mean, even if Kuminga is a one in 3 years, what's the rest of the roster look like at that point? Like, you might have that part, but then what's the, but maybe he's a one on a 50-win team that can't win a title. There are so many different, look at how many number ones there are right now in the league. So is it number one on a championship contender? I mean, the highest in comp, I think, with Kuminga as he's developed is could he eventually be Jaylen Brown? Well, Jaylen Brown's a two. A two that sometimes functions as the more clutch player of the two stars that the Celtics have, obviously, with Jason Tatum struggles. sometimes in those situations. But make no mistake, I mean, Jaylen Brown's the 2, right? Or the 1A next to Tatum. So if that's his high end, then where's your Tatum? Where's your other guy? So I think that's the part. Yada Amin, Zion's hurt all the time. Would sound good if he wasn't so injury prone. Well, if he wasn't so injury prone, you wouldn't be able to get him. Like, that's part of it. Like, that's the no risk it, no biscuit component to this. That's the part that you have to look at, and that's the part that I think frustrates a big chunk of the Warrior fan base, is the fact that they seemingly do not want to take any kind of risk on something that may not work out that well. They'd rather stand pat, be mid, not make the catastrophic move, but also because you don't risk making the catastrophic move, you also don't risk maybe making the move that can flip the trajectory of the franchise back in a different way, to where everything's seen in a different light. And look, I've said it, and I'll say it again. I mean, you only get one shot. You only get one shot to make whatever the move is to try and pair whoever the player is next to Steph Curry for these next couple of years. And here's the other blunt reality. The blunt reality is it very well is already done with Steph and contending for championships. Like, that's the most likely scenario, is that it is already done. But that's where it leads down this path of, well, what do you do? Like, you can incrementally upgrade and try to get to the 6th seed. You can try to do what I would consider to be the moderate, most efficient upgrade, which would be the Cam Johnson upgrade, which I believe, and I do believe the Warriors could get on. If they went and got Cam Johnson today, I do think the Warriors could get to the in between 4 and 6 in the Western Conference. That's the one that I think has the highest potential for some kind of salvaging of take some pressure off Steph, complement the other players on the roster without being a bona fide star. So that would be a move I would look. But you could do Vucevic and Cam Johnson and Jimmy Butler. And I mean, I know you can't literally do all those things, but you could do all those things and have it still not be enough. It doesn't mean you don't try, because here's the other option. The other option is stand pat, do nothing, end up 11th or 10th in the West, because that's where the Warriors are headed. The Warriors are headed right now anywhere between 10, 11, and 12 in the West. With this team as it's currently constituted, they are 10, 11, or 12 in the Western Conference. Bottom line. The other thing you can do is, and this is not happening, but if you truly believe they can't contend, it's over, they're risk averse, look, well, then you trade Steph Curry. And look, I'm not advocating for that. I wouldn't want that. I don't think any Warrior fan would want that. But like, if you're truly in this next timeline rebuild and don't think you can get it done with anything that you have right now, then that's what you do. Uncle Looney, once I heard Curry need to get his knees drained, I feel like this year might be done. Yeah, that was another level. That was another level and a new wrinkle when Steve Kerr dropped that, post-game after Detroit. Yeah, anytime. I mean, that is the tell. If he's got to get his knee drained, and I think, he related it to the fluid on the knee. Steve said, Steph's dealing with, the fluid on the knee. So, yeah, every so often you got to drain it. And when you drain it, you need a few days off. So I think that's shedding a little bit more light as to how the Warriors are managing the nights that Steph takes off to prevent that from building up and becoming so unmanageable that he's got to miss a couple of weeks. Because if he has to miss a couple of weeks, then this year is out. Yadamin. JD, what's your favorite move? I think it's pretty clear. It's Cam Johnson at this point. Yeah, that's the one. I mean, Schroeder is tradable, by the way. But he's not tradable until the day before or the day of the trade deadline, based on the semantics of the CBA. But the Warriors did trade for him on December the 15th, so they traded for him early enough to where he could be traded again. No question. So, yeah, Schroeder is tradable. What do you think the Kuminga contract is going to look like, JD? I think right now it's looking like $35 million a year. I mean, that truly, I think is what I think it's probably going to be, 5 years? And, he's their own free agent, so they could do 5 years. I mean, would it be 5 and all of a sudden I'm bad at math, even though I'm actually good at math? 5 and 180? I don't know, 5 and 175? I'm looking at the Franz Wagner contract. I mean, Franz Wagner got 5 and 224. I think Kuminga would be 5 and 170, 175 at this point. I mean, I think he's elite. Maybe it starts at 30 and it the incremental raises, right? It goes 30, 34, 38. 30, 33, 39, 42, whatever it is. So, yeah, I think he's going to be in that 150 to 175 range if he comes back and continues to play how he had played. Now, is that a number that makes you gulp? It would make me gulp a little bit. But yeah, I think the Kuminga deal is, he's started to play at in a way that the Warriors were more comfortable with before he ended up with the injury. But no, I think he's absolutely going to be in that. But the market also dictates it. The market will dictate. Does he get an offer sheet for more? Does he get an offer sheet for that much? I mean, it really takes one. Can Kuminga go get an offer from a team? And there are only a couple of teams that even can. But can Kuminga get an offer that the Warriors are compelled to match, even if they're uncomfortable about it? Because let's be honest, the Warriors can't, if this thing gets to restricted free agency on Kuminga, the Warriors can't just let Kuminga go for nothing. Right? That's the one thing that can't happen. So, does he become a sign-and-trade candidate? That also is part of the flexibility of not doing something at the deadline and waiting until the offseason. You've got more moves to be made. I just think that falls on, that falls on an ear that nobody wants to listen to. Nobody wants to hear optionality and kicking it to the summer again, because the Warriors just did that and did nothing. Now, they tried to do things, but ultimately didn't get anything accomplished. 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. Quick timeout. We'll come back and continue with Just Dubs here on a Saturday on the Sports Leader.
Just Dubs with John Dickinson keeps rolling. Streaming live on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
All right, welcome back. Moving our way toward noon here. Just Dubs with JD, the 2-hour edition here on Saturdays on KNBR, the sports leader. Appreciate everybody watching on YouTube and Twitch as well. A lot of the regulars from Dubs OT, and we'll have Dubs OT back with you 7 o'clock on Monday following the Warriors and the Toronto Raptors. And then back next week as the Warriors head home at Harmonic Brewing in Thrive City, beginning with the game against the Wizards a week from tonight. And we also have the big show on January 20th on the MLK holiday for the Warriors-Celtics game. After that game, we are doing a Dubs OT meet and greet at Harmonic in Thrive City. That's a 2 o'clock game. So that game's going to end right around 4:30. The college football national championship game is going to be on the airwaves of KNBR with Ohio State and Notre Dame going at it. And so we're going to be a YouTube-only show. Greg Silver's going to be by. Kyle Haar's going to be on hand, assuming he doesn't go out of town for that weekend where he'd have a couple of days off after working on Saturday. So, but again, stop by, say hi at Harmonic in Thrive City, and meet the crew, maybe put one on the JD tab, and we'll have a lot of fun talking some Warriors. And again, more of an informal setting with the YouTube-only show following the Warriors and the Celtics, and we'll see where things sit at that point. But, yeah, a lot of games at Harmonic following the Warriors games here coming up with 8 of 9, I believe, for Golden State at home, and the one game's going to be in Sacramento a week from this coming Wednesday on the 22nd. All of that leads up to the trade deadline. So the 2 more road games, as we've talked about, and then the 8 of 9, one game in Utah, and then it's the trade deadline. So it is going to be here rapidly. More from the chat in just a second. I do want to play a couple of these clips, and part of the reason we're talking so heavily about the trade deadline and moves is just how ugly this week has been for the Warriors. They lose Jonathan Kuminga, even though they beat the Grizzlies a week ago today. They got smoked by the Kings, and the Kings are playing much better basketball, as we've said, but the Warriors no-show against Sacramento Sunday. Then they no-show against Miami on Tuesday after Miami went to Sacramento, blew a 17-point lead late, went to double overtime, ended up losing the game, but they had enough in the tank to beat the Warriors on that night and beat the Warriors comfortably on that night. Let's hear from Sam Amick. He was on FanDuel TV, Sam Amick of The Athletic, one of the best in the business. He was on FanDuel TV, and he laid out some of what was going on inside Chase Center as the Warriors were defeated by those Miami Heat on Tuesday.
So the other night when I'm in San Francisco and they get walloped by Miami, after the game, there's a place called the Bridge Club near the arena floor at Chase Center. And the owner, Joe Lacob, and GM Mike Dunleavy often meet there. Back when Bob Myers ran the team, that's where they would meet as well. And it sounds like it got a little spicy down there, just as far as, the post-loss unpacking of what had happened on the floor. And you felt, some people who walked by and even engaged with Joe and Mike could really feel the frustration from the group. And that makes a lot of sense. They just got beat really badly. So then what happens is, whether it's Jimmy Butler or anybody else, there's going to be a constant recalculation happening for teams like the Warriors, and just what do we need to do? Because it's one thing to not feel like you're a contender. It's another to go out and just get destroyed by a Heat team that didn't have Jimmy Butler. Their reasoning for not going after Jimmy, even beyond the money, is that to this point, they've been pretty happy with Andrew Wiggins' play, and the idea of also giving up a Jonathan Kuminga in that deal, even though he's hurt right now, is something they weren't looking to do. The prospect of Wiggins and Kuminga going out and Butler coming in, they didn't like kind of how that looked for them.
And I get that. We talked about that earlier in the show. I understand not wanting to give up both. in part because you need Wiggins and want to put Wiggins with Jimmy Butler, but then you're also giving up your top future prospect, and that's what Kuminga is. We can disagree or agree to disagree on the level of prospect that he is and what his ceiling is and how much he can help right now, like all of those things. But and look, the Warriors are not averse from having heated, spicy conversations among their management when things are not going well. I think, if anything, that to me is an indicator that they know they have to do something. And it's not like, I mean, they know even a small move is necessary. Look at the Schroeder move. And the Schroeder move has not worked to this point, but they made the Schroeder move pretty much in light of the fact that DeAnthony Melton went from being a really important cog in the system to out for the season. And I think there were a lot of indicators that while Melton hadn't played a ton for the Warriors, when he did, he was impactful, that they needed somebody to help fill that void in some form or fashion in the interim immediately to prevent the thing from completely careening down the mountain. And so they go and they make the move. I feel like they're at that point right now with Kuminga out where they have to go make at least a moderate move pretty quickly. And I think that move would be obviously the Vucevic move. Then there's this from Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report, formerly of Yahoo. And he also writes with Mark Stein, Mark Stein's Substack. Jake Fisher addressing the Warriors and where they're at the deadline. And then he at the end here throws in don't be surprised if the Warriors, who are out on Butler now, maybe get back in on Jimmy Butler. Here's Jake Fisher.
Warriors are also not exactly where they were expecting to be. Golden State, as of today, finds themselves in the 9 spot. They're not like Sac and Phoenix, completely out of the play-in tournament, but they are right at that threshold. You know, potentially 2 of the Kings, Warriors, and the Suns could all be out. And that's a really, really bad situation to be if you're all those teams. It's bad if you're Phoenix, where you have the most expensive roster in the league and you don't have any draft capital to make anything happen. It's bad if you've got potential trade requests coming from De'Aaron Fox if you don't make playoffs. For Golden State, it's bad because Steph Curry's 36 years old, and the Warriors, I know, only have 2-3 years left with him, and he's still playing at the peak of his powers. He can't do it every single night, though. That's the issue. That's why Golden State went out and made the early move for Dennis Schroeder. They wanted to specifically inject some real secondary scoring that wasn't just Steph, and it hasn't exactly worked out.
And then later on, Fisher went on to add the fact that, hey, don't be surprised if there's a little bit of desperation on both sides between Miami and the Warriors. And maybe and what it basically was is maybe you could get the deal done without giving up Kuminga. Maybe you could get creative in a deal and you know, depending upon where things sit, there'd be more prone to be a move between the two teams. So interesting and something to keep an eye on. 925 on the Golden State Lumber and Building Materials text line with a healthy Kuminga back and one trade. Look out, the Warriors will be rolling into the NBA playoffs. It's not quite that simple. Not quite that simple. You know, the other thing that came up the other night, and this is something I mentioned on Dubs OT last night a little bit, was, and look, Guy Santos really helped the Warriors. He played well last night. He played very well in Detroit, helped him truthfully win that game against the Pistons. But Steve Kerr postgame, after, he said, hey, Guy Santos did a lot of the things that we need to do night in, night out to win in terms of the hustle plays and the energy and the effort. And that's the thing with this team right now. And like they're just, the margin for error is so slim that they have to play hard every night. And they just are not equipped because they're older. And look, Wiggins is not the kind of guy that's out burning it every single night at 150 on tilt. And so, he has a lot of nights. He's become a very good 3-and-D wing but he's not a number 2 option. He's kind of a number 4 option. And he's settled in and seemingly likes that role. And, anybody can demand more of him if you want, but it's not necessarily going to be there, at least not on a consistent basis. But they have to play hard every night to win. And, to have a chance to win. And I just think and starting with Steph and Draymond, they just don't have the energy as older players to do that. And so if that's the case, then you have to loosen that margin for error. It can't be so tight. And I think the Warriors thought they had that in terms of the depth at the beginning of the year, and everybody was fresh. And again, they had a good initial plan, as I've said many times. But once that initial plan went away, you got to be able to adjust, and now they're caught in this in-between mode. But I don't think it's as simple as Kuminga comes back and you make one move and you're steamrolling into the playoffs, unless that move's Cam Johnson. That's the one move I think they could make. Jimmy, I don't know. Jimmy could be that move also, but I understand all the reasons why Jimmy would be just as angry as he is now with another team if that team wasn't going to give him a contract extension. All right, one final quick timeout. We'll come back, and we'll wrap things up here on this Saturday and set the table for what's ahead here for the next week for the Warriors. It's Just Dubs with JD on the Sports Leader.
Back with more Blue and Gold. Just Dubs with John Dickinson. Now continues on the Sports Leader. Streaming live at KNBR.com and on the KNBR app.
All right, final segment here on this Saturday. Just Dubs with JD. Going to enjoy the rest of the weekend off. Hope everybody else does as well. Enjoying a little NFL. A couple of games today and then 3 more tomorrow and 1 on Monday. We will be back on Monday with Dubs OT following the Warriors and the Raptors. There was somebody in the chat that said, Warriors better beat the Raptors. 8-30. Yeah, they better beat the Raptors. I mean, that is a true must-win right now. I've said it. I think the Warriors are hanging by a thread right now as to can they avoid the 3-4 game losing streak that would have them essentially buried in the Western Conference, even the play-in race? Or, can they separate themselves a little bit from 500 again, or at least stay at 500 until they can make a move or make a couple of moves that can help push them forward? They clearly are at a crossroads there. And so I think that's something to continue to monitor. Uncle Looney, again, here in the YouTube chat, will clean up some chats here in the final 5 minutes or so. I'm afraid even if the Dubs made some trades, is Curry going to be better? Warriors could make trades, but unless Curry plays much better, it might not matter. Well, I think making the trades will help Curry be better. I think Vucevic helps Curry. I think Cam Johnson would help Curry. Not that the Warriors are going to do that. I mean, again, I would look to. I'd look to make a couple of moves. I'd look to get the stretch big. Again, if the decision is go get Vucevic or do nothing, then go get Vucevic. I think that's an easy one. We a lot of time talking about Zion. Yada Amin. I wouldn't give up Kuminga for Zion. Well, you probably would have to give up Kuminga for Zion. And look, Zion is a star, potential superstar when he's healthy, and we know it because we've seen it. And oh, by the way, Zion Williamson, interesting note, I was looking at his contract. Right, and I'm bringing it back up here again, mini screens. Bringing it back up. His contract, 36.7, 39.4, 42.1, 44.8. So for this year plus 3 for Zion Williamson. And he's then an unrestricted free agent in 2028. So it's this year plus 3 for Zion. Zion's basically going to be making pretty close to what Kuminga's probably going to be making. Like, Kuminga, think about this. Zion might make 39 next year. Kuminga might make 35. 33 as a starting point for his deal. I mean, Kuminga is going to be, by the end of their deal, they're going to be making almost the same amount of money probably by 26, 27, 28. We know Zion Williamson can be a star. It's just a matter of his health, his weight, and those kinds of things. More from the chat. I think the Dubs should go for Vuce or Valanciunas. Yeah, I like Valanciunas as well. Valanciunas he's a physical force. He can score on the inside. He's a hell of a screen setter. He's a tone setter. Valanciunas is a good player. Again, he's not a stretch big, but he is the kind of big that can score a little bit in the paint and clog and uses fouls and bring a physicality and things like that. I've always liked Jonas Valanciunas. Good player. And yeah, I think he would be somebody that you wouldn't have to give up a heck of a lot for. You'd give up less, I think, to get him than you would have to give up for Vucevic. And I don't think it's a bad thing for the Warriors to take Vucevic. They'd be able to offer expiring contracts plus second-round picks, plus you'd take Vucevic back and he'd be under contract for next year, meaning you could put him in a trade. next year as well, or in the offseason as well. So I think, again, low risk kind of a thing. And so I think that's, something to continue to keep an eye under. The main goal for this season was to get out of the tax. They may say otherwise, but that was the main goal. Yeah, that was a primary goal. I don't know if that was the number one goal, but they did get under the tax, which, again, they're all about flexibility. Crito MVP 11. JD, I think time to trade Curry for picks. No. Herb Jones. I like Herb Jones. I like Herb Jones a lot. He just got hurt, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, torn shoulder. He had torn labrum in his shoulder. I was watching the other night. And so, the Pelicans are really going to be in tank mode. But Herb Jones is a good player. Herb Jones is a good defender, just signed a 4-year, $53.8 million contract. Going back to 2023. So he's got this year. I mean, Herb Jones doesn't make a lot of money. He's making $12.9, $13.9, $14.8. Herb Jones, would the Pelicans want off? I mean, Herb Jones, I think, is a winning player. Would the Pelicans want off of that for an expiring? Possibly. But, yeah, I think Herb Jones is a winning player, but he doesn't seem like he's on top of, He wouldn't be at the top of the list. He makes so little that you'd want to keep him, I think. Bobby War, sorry, JD, Cam's not worth it. Best to hold on to their assets and go big in the offseason. Well, Estimated Eye says they removed Cam Johnson from the ESPN site. Come on. All right, that'll do it. And, yes, I did address Herb Jones. Herb Jones is a good player. I do like Herb Jones. Wow. Herb Jones and Zion? Again, a lot of money's still got to go back the other way if you look to make that deal for the Warriors. So, all right, appreciate everybody in the YouTube chat. I know, smaller crowd on these Saturday mornings as we continue to build things up here, but appreciate everybody. Dubs OT's been going strong. We got Dubs OT again on Monday and Wednesday here on KNBR, and then back at Harmonic a week from tonight. So thanks to Raf Corral in our San Francisco studios. Excellent job. And we will talk to you Monday right here on KNBR 104.5 and 680, the Sports Leader.
JD on a Saturday just feels right.